Hi, 6th grade. This is Mrs. Daywald. Today we're going to be learning adding and subtracting of fractions. First thing you need to do is write the problem vertically. When you write the problem vertically, that just means one on top of the other. So they're written horizontally right here. We want to rewrite them, and I'm going to use a space over here. We want to rewrite them vertically. 1/3 plus 1/5. Next thing I need to do is make sure I have a common denominator. A common denominator is the same thing as the least common multiple. So I need to find the common denominator for 3 and 15. Right now, list 3 and 15 on a side paper for yourself. Press pause and find the LCM, or the least common denominator, or least common multiple for 3 and 5. Okay, hopefully you are done with that now after you pressed pause and you found that the least common denominator is 15. Notice 3 and 5 can be multiplied to find the least common denominator sometimes, but not always. Sometimes the least common denominator will be a smaller number, which is easier to work with. Now, I want to write an equivalent fraction for 1/3 and 1/5. So 3 and 15. What did I do to 3 to get to 15? Okay, times 5. Whatever I do to the denominator, I have to do to the numerator. So 1 times 5 is 5. Going down to 1/5 is how many 15ths? Well, I multiplied the denominator by 3. So we're going to multiply the numerator by 3 as well. And now, because I have a common denominator, I can simply add the numerators. When I add and subtract, denominator stays the same. So I have 15, and I have 5 plus 3 is 8, and 8/15. And lastly, I need to make sure that I have simplified my problem. When in doubt, always check 3. 3 can be your trick. I know that 3 is not divisible by either of those. And I am finished. That is a simplified fraction. I am going to erase example 1. You obviously have a side paper that you're doing everything on, so you would not erase. You just would keep your notes because I'm going to want to see your notes. And now we're going to do example 2. Again, we're going to rewrite it vertically. Press pause if you're a little bit slower at writing than me. Example 2, 9/10. That should be minus, it looks like a multiplication, 7/8. Okay, so once again, I need to find the common denominator, the least common denominator. Multiplying 8 times 10 will not give me the least common denominator. So press pause, use your ladder method to find the least common denominator. Or actually, I'll do the ladder method with you to find the least common denominator. So if I'm going to do the ladder method, it would be 8 and 10. And I'm finding the LCM or LCD, same thing, of 8 and 10. And I know that a common factor for 8 and 10 is 2. So I can divide 8 divided by 2 is 4. 10 divided by 2 is 5. And now I need to know that 4 and 5 are number neighbors. They don't always have to be number neighbors to be finished, but if I do have number neighbors down here, I know I'm done. And notice the 2, the 4, and the 5 make an L for least common denominator. And I can then multiply all of those numbers, 2 times 4 times 5. And I can get the least common denominator. So I know that 4 times 5 is 20 times 2, so the least common denominator is going to be 40. So now I can write my equivalent fractions with the least common denominator of 40. All right, I say to myself, what did I do to the 10 to get to the 40? If you don't know, you can use the inverse operation and do 40 divided by 10, and that tells me it's going to be 4, so I multiplied by 4. So 40 divided by 10 is 4, and 10 times 4 is 40. So it works both ways. If you don't know, you can divide to figure it out. And I'm going to multiply up top. 9 times 4 is 36. And then I have, what did I do to the 8 to get to the 40? If you don't know, what is 40 divided by 8? Oh, it's 5. Okay, so then 8 times 5 is going to be 40. And I'm going to multiply upstairs also. 7 times 5 is 35. And notice I'm subtracting. So when I'm adding and subtracting fractions, denominator stays the same. So the denominator is going to stay 40, but I'm going to subtract this time 36 minus 35. And the answer is 1. Can I simplify? When whenever the numerator is 1, you're done. You don't have to simplify anything else if the numerator is 1. So I know I am finished. Last but not least, I'm going to do 5/12 plus 1/6. I'm going to erase all of this. I erased example 2. I know you're doing it in a side paper. Example 2 is 5/12 plus 1/6. And I need to find the least common denominator. And I know that 12 is a multiple of 6. So always think, if you're thinking mathematically, if 12 is a multiple of 6, then the least common multiple has to be 12. So my least common denominator is going to be 12. Now, 5/12 is equal to how many 12ths? Well, that's silly. 5/12 is equal to 5/12. I don't have to do anything. I could multiply by 1, but it's not necessary. 6 times what equals 12? Okay, it's going to be 6 times 2. And 1 times 2 is 2. And once again, I'm adding. So 5 plus 2 is 7, and my answer is going to be 7/12. Remember, denominator stays the same. And 7's a prime number, so if 7's a prime number, if 12 is not divisible by 7, I know that I have finished my problem. Okay, we're going to move down on your page. We are on page 3, of course. And I am going to now do mixed numbers, adding and subtracting of mixed numbers. Unlike adding and subtracting of multiplying and dividing fractions, you do not need to change to all fractions first. So I'm going to keep them as mixed numbers or mixed fractions because I can add and subtract just like I would add and subtract whole numbers in columns. Basically, I'll deal with the fraction and then I'm going to deal with the whole number. I, once again, though, have to find a common denominator, and it's for 6 and 4. Press pause, use your ladder method, and find the common denominator. Okay, hopefully you found that the common denominator for 4 and 6 is 12. And I'm going to now write an equivalent fraction. So I have 3/4. What did I do to the 4 to get to the 12? Times 3 upstairs, so I have 9/12. What did I do to the 6 to get to the 12? Times 2, so I have 2/12. 1/6 is equal to 2/12, and 3/4 is equal to 9/12. Now, I can add my fraction. I'm going to deal with my fraction first. So I have 9 plus 2 is 11, and my denominator stays the same. And then the thing that a lot of you will forget is to add the whole numbers. So 2 plus 1 is 3. And now 12 and 11 are number neighbors, so I know that that part of the fraction does not need to be simplified. And that is my final answer. Okay, moving on to the next one. I would like you to do this one on your own. Press pause, and then I will do it as quickly as I can, and you can be checking your work. And if you make a mistake, press pause and then fix it and go back. So it's kind of your responsibility to learn this on your own by pressing pause and trying some things before I do them, because just watching will not help you learn math. So do this one on your own, and then I will do it with you. After you did it on your own, you can check your work. Okay, hopefully you are all done, and you can now check your work with me. I found the common denominator to be 18. So when I wrote my equivalent fractions, 6 times what equals 18? It's going to be times 3. I'm going to do that upstairs, which would be 15. Check to make sure that you got 15/18. 6/12 is equal to 15/18. And downstairs, I have 9 times 2 times 2. So I have 4/18. And now when I subtract 15 minus 4, I get 11. And remember, denominator stays the same. 11/18. And I'm going to also subtract 4 minus 2. And I'm going to get 2. All right, last problem. Once again, do this one on your own and then check it with me. And I found my common denominator to be 12. I multiplied times 4 on the first one, and I got 8/12 times 3 times 3, and I got 9/12, and now I'm going to add them up, and I get 8 plus 9 is 17/12, which would be, and then I add the whole number, which is 3 and 17/12. Now there's a problem with 17/12, and the problem is that it's improper, so I need to convert that to a mixed number. So how do I do that? I want to divide them. Top number goes on the inside. And 12 goes into 17 one time. I multiply 1 times 12, I get 12. When I subtract, I get a 5. Now, the 5 is going to end up being the numerator, and the denominator from 17/12 stays the same, which is also the divisor. So I have 1 and 5/12. Now I need to also, though, add 3 plus 1 and 5/12 to get my final answer. And basically, I'm just going to add the whole numbers. 3 plus 1 is 4, 4 and 5/12. I hope you enjoyed this lesson on adding and subtracting fractions and mixed numbers. Keep practicing and keep thinking mathematically.